Good morning. I'm the Reverend Denise Gouch. My pronouns are she, her, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to worship with the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville. As Unitarian Universalists, our spiritual paths vary, but in this congregation, we have made a covenant together. We affirm our interdependence, celebrate our differences, and work for justice. We are a welcoming congregation, and we deepen our relationships as we serve our congregation's mission to create community, nurture spiritual growth, and act on our values in the broader world, guided by reason and compassion. I'd like to extend a special welcome to visitors worshiping with us this morning. If you are seeking a spiritual home, we hope that you may find it here. If you have questions about our congregation, please do contact me. You can find my email address in the staff directory under Contact Us on our website, and I look forward to hearing from you. If you are joining us for the live broadcast of this service on Webinar Jam, won't you please say hello in the chat? We love knowing that you're here. No matter what platform you're using to join us, you can find helpful resources such as the order of service, ways to give, and the social hour following the service in the worship portal on our website, firstuunash.org. We are so glad to have you join us for worship.
Good morning. My name is Jay Tiefenbrunn. My pronouns are she, her, and I am delighted to serve as your Director of Music Ministries. Our opening song today was composed by Sarah Dan Jones, a UU musician and music director. The chant that we have come to know and love in Singing the Journey is actually the chorus of a longer song composed in September of 2001. I hope that you will take a breath with me and center into your heart space as we join the duo Unfolding of Laura Weiss and Sarah Jebian in singing Meditation on Breathing.
Good morning. My name is Valerie Martin. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm co-chair of the worship committee. The words for the call to worship this morning were written by Kimberly Ann Tomchak Carlson. It is not by chance that you arrived here today. You have been looking for something larger than yourself. Inside of you, there is a yearning, a calling, a hope for more, a desire for a place of belonging and caring. Through your struggles, someone nurtured you into being, instilling a belief in a shared purpose, a common yet precious resource that belongs to all of us when we share. And so you began seeking a beloved community, a people that does not put fences around love, a community that holds its arms open to the possibilities of love, a heart home to nourish your soul and share your gifts. Welcome home. Welcome to worship. The words for the chalice lighting were written by Cynthia Landrum. As we kindle this flame, may it spark in each of us connection and commitment to this living tradition and to each other.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Diane Dowgiert, and I'm here today in the library at the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville, and I have a story to share with you. It's a story that comes to us from the Christian scriptures. Have you ever wondered where the saying, "Oh, you of little faith," comes from? It comes from the story I'm about to tell, a story from long ago and far away. It's from that long ago time when the stories of Jesus were first written. It is set on the faraway Sea of Galilee, which is still known today for its sudden and violent storms. Jesus had a loyal group of followers and friends known as the disciples. One of those disciples was named Peter. The story goes that one stormy night, the disciples set sail on the Sea of Galilee. They left Jesus behind on the shore so he could be alone for time to pray. On the sea, the winds grew fierce and the waves grew large. The disciples grew more and more frightened as the hours of the night went on. Then, in the wee hours of the morning, the disciples looked at the shore and they saw what appeared to be a ghost walking toward them, walking across the surface of the water. This frightened the disciples even more. Then they heard the voice of Jesus saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answers, "Jesus, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And Jesus says, "Come." So Peter gets out of the boat and starts walking toward Jesus. The wind picks up. Peter gets frightened again and begins to sink. He cries out, "Lord, save me." Jesus reaches out his hand, catching Peter, saying, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Then Peter and Jesus got into the boat and the wind stopped. We have all known stormy times when the winds of life blow us this way and that, times when we are frightened because we don't know how we'll make it through. We tell the story of Jesus walking on the water not because it is literally true. The story was written many years after the events it describes, and the people who wrote the story weren't even there on that stormy night. So no one knows for sure exactly what happened. It is one of the many miracle stories that is told in the Bible. Some say that the miracle isn't that Jesus walked on water, but that Peter got out of the boat, that he didn't stay stuck in his fear and his doubt, but took action, even though he didn't know what the outcome of that action would be. We tell this story because it gives us hope. gives us hope that when we are frightened, even when we doubt that anyone or anything can save us, we can take one small action toward that which will help calm the waters and move us beyond our fears. Here ends the story for today.
Oh, beloveds, I for one am glad to be reminded that even when we are frightened, even when we doubt that anyone or anything can save us, we can take one small action. Perhaps you are also. In appreciation for the small tasks in front of us, let us join our hearts and minds with this prayer written by Lisa Friedman. Spirit of life and love, we live in a fragmented world that tempts us to despair. We would put it back together piece by piece if it were ours to choose, but sometimes the fragments are enough. In a world of cruelty, there is still power in every act of kindness. In a time of doubt, there is still power in every act of hope. In an age of division, there is still power in every act of unity. May we remember that sometimes the fragments of meaning we make are just the right size to hold in our hands. Blessed be, may it be so. Amen. In this season of virtual offering bowls, we are especially grateful for the steady generosity which allows us both within and beyond the congregation to continue creating community, nurturing spiritual growth, and acting on our values. While I'm not happy that we don't have friendly ushers helping to collect the offering right now, I feel grateful that our finance folks have made sure that anyone, anytime, can access our online donation form at firstuunash.org. And I am grateful for all of you who decide to use that form or to mail checks into the office. You may know that we share every Sunday's collection with an organization whose work outside our walls aligns with our values. Our Share the Plate partner for the month of December is Bookem, an organization envisioning a future in Nashville where all children own books and know firsthand the joy and value of reading. We have a brief video introduction to their work this morning.
Hello, we're Bookem. We're a local nonprofit that provides free books and reading role models to schools in Davidson County, Tennessee. When the pandemic hit, we had to change up our process, but we never changed our mission to make sure students were still getting books even though they were no longer in school. So we met students in their own communities at meal sites to provide free book bags and resources to make sure they could actively read while they were at home. We hope to be back in schools in the fall to make sure students were still reading there with our reading role models so they could still say,
"We love Bookem!"
Our reading this morning is the poem A Blessing for Traveling in the Dark by Jan Richardson. Go slow if you can. Slower. More slowly still. Friendly, dark, or fearsome, this is no place to break your neck by rushing, by running, by crashing into what you cannot see. Then again, it is true. Different darks have different tasks, and if you have arrived here unawares, if you have come in peril or in pain, this might be no place you should dawdle. I do not know what these shadows ask of you, what they might hold that means you good or ill. It is not for me to reckon whether you should linger or you should leave. But this is what I can ask for you. That in the darkness there be a blessing, that in the shadows there be a welcome, that in the night you be encompassed by the love that knows your name.
The season of holidays and holy days is upon us, a time when days grow short and winter's darkness lengthens over us. It's a time of turning inward, for dwelling in the interior spaces of our lives, the inside of our homes, and the inward places of our hearts and minds. On the Christian calendar, this is the second Sunday of Advent, a season of expectant waiting, a season of hope. Joanna Macy, environmental activist and scholar of Buddhism and deep ecology, says that hope is active, something we do rather than have. I had the privilege of studying with Joanna for a semester while I was in seminary. The very first day of class, she told us that when she began her environmental activism 25 years prior, she insisted that the work must be grounded in hope. As environmental crises intensified, both in number and severity, she began to believe that while hope was essential, it was impossible to turn away from the despair that she and others who dedicated their lives to caring for our planet were feeling. She began to believe that hope needs to be grounded in compassion, not looking away from or denying the suffering, but allowing the pain of our world to break our hearts open, and broken open to an enlarged sense of compassion. She began to believe that despair is as much a part of the work as hope, that activists need ways to look at the painful reality of ecological devastation without becoming stuck in despair, that what is needed is active hope. Her insights can be applied to the human condition too, for we are part of the ecosystem of our planet. Whereas passive hope is waiting for external agencies to bring about what we desire, active hope is about becoming active participants in bringing about what it is that we hope for. It means taking action without assurance of the outcome. While despair may be the opposite of hope, the antidote to despair is compassion. Compassion is the ground in which hope grows. The story of Peter stepping out of the boat when he sees Jesus walking across the stormy sea with a hand outstretched is told in 3 of the 4 Gospels. It is one of a sequence of 3 miracle stories: the feeding of 5,000 with only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, walking on water and healing the sick. What comes right before these stories is one of the most gruesome tales in the Bible: the imprisonment and beheading of John the Baptist, who was a relative of Jesus. When Jesus heard the news of what had happened to John, he withdrew to a deserted place to be by himself. But crowds of people heard that he was nearby, and they followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus saw the crowds, he instructed them to stay, even though his disciples wanted to send them away. One way to read these miracle stories is that Jesus miraculously changed the laws of nature. Another way to read them is as stories that are rich with metaphors and lessons. When Jesus had his heart broken open with grief at the death of John the Baptist, he suffered alongside the sick and hungry in the crowds, awakening hope within them, hope that things could be different, that they could take action to change the circumstances, finding their generous spirit and sharing from their abundance, finding the inner capacity and strength for healing, finding the courage to step out of a boat of fear and despair. Compassion means to suffer with, not to take on the suffering of another, but to be with them as a companion and a witness, not to turn away from our own suffering or that of others. In the book, Active Hope, How to Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy, Joanna Macy and her co-author, Chris Johnstone, tell another story about the power of compassion. This one is from the legends of King Arthur. An old king known as the Fisher King was in great pain from a wound in his groin. The land that he ruled had become blighted and desolate. The Fisher King was the victim of a spell that had stopped his wound from healing. The spell had taken the powers of regeneration from the king and his lands. No one in his court ever made mention of the horrors they faced, yet they knew that the spell might be broken if a knight appeared and asked the Fisher King a compassionate question. One such knight had made a visit, but had been brought up to believe that such a question would be, well, rude. When he met the king, the pain on the king's face was visible, and the stench from his wound hung in the air. Yet the knight acted as if nothing was wrong. He cut the visit short and rode back to King Arthur's court, haunted by what he had seen. Years later, he made his way back to the Fisher King, where he found the king to be in an even greater state of suffering. This time the knight walked right up to the king and knelt before him. "My lord, what aileth thee?" he asked. The question had an immediate and powerful effect that the knight cared enough to ask. Color began to return to the Fisher King's face. He rose from his couch, health regained. The desolate land began to bloom once again. The spell was broken. Once again, we don't have to think of the spell in this story as a magical thing, but more the ways of being that can overtake us if we aren't mindful, like the spell of business as usual, going about our daily lives as if nothing is wrong, or the spell of denial, seeing things the way we want them to be instead of the way they are, or the spell of being nice and polite and not speaking of things that are uncomfortable. What these stories teach is that hope begins when we can see and speak the truth of the pain and suffering present in our world, even though we think it will drive us deeper into despair. When we have the courage to bear witness to another person's pain and say, "Tell me what's wrong. Where does it hurt?" And then truly listen and be a companion in their time of struggle. When we are open to suffering, our own and that of others, we open our hearts to compassion and thus are moved into action instead of frozen with fear. We don't have to walk on water, but we can do things that we never thought were possible. This has been a year of doing things we never thought we could do. I remember back in March when the spell of denial about the pandemic had been broken and we started doing church remotely. I couldn't bear to think of Easter Sunday without being able to gather. Yet the church that I was serving at the time and we made our way through. Since then, it's like all the pain of the world has been laid bare, pain that has always been there, but now we can't look away. The pain of unemployment and food insecurity for so many, the eruption of protest following police killings of Black people, destructive tornadoes and hurricanes, a political climate of division and mistrust, all of which were happening before the pandemic. It's just that now we're all paying attention. The longer the pandemic goes on, the more tempting it is to return to the spell of business as usual, or to go numb and fall under the spell of denial. When I feel those spells starting to overtake me, I remind myself that we are living through a time like no other. What we do now will become the stuff of stories that people will tell decades and even centuries from now. So, I do my best to pay attention, even to the scary parts. I find small things I can do. I'm finding great joy in composting in my backyard, making dirt out of yard waste and food scraps. Did you know that reducing food waste is one action that scientists say will significantly draw down carbon and start to reverse global warming? Did you know another action that will have significant impact is educating girls? I'm also finding great joy in connecting with NOAH, Nashville Organized for Action and Hope, a congregationally based community organizing group. The First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville, as you know, supports NOAH with generous financial donations and many dedicated volunteers. NOAH is working on the systemic issues that perpetuate racism, oppression, and inequality right here in our community. This is a season of expectant waiting, gestating and nurturing possibilities for a future that will be different. It is not passive waiting, but doing the work of preparing our hearts and our minds for new ways of being. It is a season of hope, one that calls us out of our boats of fear and despair, remembering that hope is not something we have, but what we do. Remember, it is only when Peter quit moving that he began to sink. And it was only when the Fisher King's pain was seen and named that he and his world began to heal. As the season lengthens over us, may this time be fertile and filled with compassion. May it be so. May we make it so through our living.
Our closing song today was written by Joseph Shabalala, founder and musical director of the South African group Ladysmith Black Mambazo. For a very long time, the indigenous peoples of South Africa were kept from their native lands by European colonists. And even as recently as 1988, with South Africa under apartheid law, Joseph did not know if he would be able to return to his homeland from his travels in New York City. And so, in a New York City taxicab, the words and music came. From the Zulu, Tula Klizio, Nala Pasekaya. The translation is, Be still, my heart. Even here, I am home. In many African traditions, there is always movement with singing. But under apartheid, powerful traditional Zulu dances were forbidden, and so the people developed the silent stomp in quiet defiance in order to stay out of prison. The words are Tula Klizio, Nala Pasekaya. I hope you will rise up in body or in spirit and join in the singing. Tula Klizio, Nala Pasekaya, Tula Klizio, Nala Pasekaya. Hey Kaya Nala Pasekaya, Hey Kaya Nala Pasekaya, Tula Klizio Nala Pasekaya, Tula Klizio Nala Pasekaya, Hey Kaya Nala Pasekaya, Hey Kaya Nala Pasekaya, Tula Klizio Nala Pasekaya, Tula Klizio Nala Pasekaya, Hey Kaya Nala Pasekaya, Hey Kaya Nala Pasekaya, Tula Klizio Nala Pasekaya, Tula Klizio Nala Pasekaya, Hey Kaya Nala Pasekaya, Hey Kaya Nala Pasekaya, Tula Klizio Nala Pasekaya, Tula Klizio Nala Pasekaya, Hey Kaya Nala Pasekaya, Hey Kaya Nala Pasekaya, Hey Kaya Nala Pasekaya, Hey Kaya Nala Pasekaya.
The words to our Chalice Extinguishing were written by Elizabeth Sell Jones, and they can be found at the bottom of our order of service. Please join me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
The words of the benediction were written by Elena Westbrook. Go in hope, for the arc of the universe is long, and we can bend it toward justice. Go in courage, for together we have the strength to confront injustice in our daily lives and the larger world. Go in love, because a holy and generous love is both the reason and the means by which we transform our lives. Go in love, go in peace. This service has ended. May our service continue renewed.